You may have heard of the Metaverse, and many have speculated that it may be the future for humanity. But what is it? Here is the definition: a virtual reality space in which users can interact with the computer-generated environment and other users. It sounds pretty simple, but you have to understand that this idea has already been put to use on multiple online platforms, like well-known Roblox back in 2006, and in our case, Minecraft, which started in 2009. And in Minecraft, people already for years have been building virtual worlds like cities, survival games, mini-games, anarchy worlds, and so much more. However, I'm getting ahead of myself. I will return to the subject later. Growing up, I played Minecraft, specifically on Xbox. I played the Xbox Legacy Edition, which was a version that was ideal for building organized cities with economies. In that version of the game, I would host many worlds, specifically city building ones, where players would collaborate and set up an in-world economy, and from there build up a large city with many neighborhoods, governments, politics, and companies. These would become highly competitive, leading to the rapid growth of these cities, until the inevitable drama that would often lead the whole community breaking apart and the end of the city. This cycle would essentially be what my childhood was all about. In 2020, something different happened. The game at this point had lost most of its player base, due to Microsoft trying to push everyone to the new version, and only a few niche players had remained. And due to the pandemic, I had free time again. So after not playing for many months, I would begin playing regularly again to pass time. At this point, on a casual day on May 27, 2020, I would decide to start up one of these city worlds to see if it would pick up. I invited some of my friends who I used to play with, and a few joined. So in order to get more players, I used the group post function, which is where you can post a board to find players, to seek out whatever users that remained were interested in joining. Since it was the beginning of the pandemic, I got a few players, and from there we struck ground, named the city Daitoshi, set up a basic economy, and began building. Now here are the systems that were set up initially. Yes, they did change over time, and I will describe that as we move on to the development. But there were some systems and functions that were and are still set in stone and were crucial to the development. On the day we started, we initially set up a mint that would print money. It was the second building to be constructed, the first being a 6-story mixed-use office building, which still has yet to be named. The mint's function was to produce a currency and control its inflation, but also regulated revenue payments to players. It was run by the host, me, and was separated from politics, and was not able to be influenced by laws. It was entirely independent. Here we get to an important point: the economy. To put it in simpler words, it wasn't player ran. It was more of like a tycoon game, with player actions to further influence the economy. Let me explain. When a player builds a new building, depending on multiple factors, the building has a real estate value. As a player gets more buildings, each one gives them a total net worth, as all the buildings add up to a certain amount. This amount is their net assets, not their total net worth. This net asset allows the mint to determine its revenue. This is because we pretend these buildings are being used by some sort of NPC citizens of the city. This revenue amount would also be affected by events, mainly player-made. This would also technically affect the economy, like lawsuits, company defaults, and inflation. This would all allow the mint to determine a player's weekly revenue, which was normally between 0.1 and 0.4% of a player's net worth. This essentially made each player act as a company, running its many functions, rather than as an individual. Due to this, the economy moved fast and led to rapid urbanization and development. Here is the summary of the city's expansion. On the starting date, the first 2 buildings were up by the first few minutes, and as more players moved in throughout the day, they set up mid-rises and stores throughout the middle area. This period of the city had exponential growth. In 3 days, a skyline had developed, and the central station was breaking ground. New towers were rising, mainly around the financial district and the entertainment districts. In just 1.5 months, over 300 buildings were completed, and the skyline had taken shape. From this sporadic development, the following months would follow a more organized development, as only certain areas and plots were opened up one at a time. The financial district would be the first. Then, north of the entertainment districts, residential districts made up of smaller low-rise buildings would be built. Soon, the beachfront area, where towers would be primarily built to maximize the prime beachfront real estate, would also rise. After this initial period of growth, the city slowed down as companies moved on to focus on major projects, which took large amounts of time. These included the 2 major mall tower complexes, and the entire Oda district, and also many new mega towers. After this period of almost a year, these projects were finished, and again, the growth of the city sped up. In 2022, growth not seen since the first couple months would occur again, as almost 100 buildings would be finished each month, leading the city proper to be filled up with structures with no open space left by the summer of 2022. The rapid growth of the city led to the situation of land running out during the city's development. This led to the policy of the efficient use of land and was implemented and passed by the Council and Department of Urban Planning. This policy made it illegal to leave any land open and essentially banned parks or any open space in the city, as they would have to be filled in with whatever structure could be built. This led to some ridiculous housing and office buildings, specifically in the village neighborhood. However, it gave the city a unique look and personality. This growth led buildings to no longer stand out, and it became sort of a collectivist city. Smaller buildings were covered up by larger skyscrapers and became forgotten. However, certain unique buildings were spared of this situation. Classical architecture is the architectural style that is objectively appealing to us humans. You will see all over the world these modern cities with their tall glass plane towers and fancy modern apartment buildings, but still people prefer the cozy brownstone townhouse or the Italian residence. And monuments still have whole sections of land cleared out just for people to be able to view them. Even in cities like Washington, D.C., which are having the issues of high population growth and not having space to accommodate because it is not able to build vertically. They still dedicate miles of land for parks and open space to show off its greatest monuments and historical structures. This situation also occurred almost identically in Daitoshi, our city on Minecraft, a virtual city with virtual buildings and roads, and with policies that would minimize open space to an extreme level. Still, buildings in a classical architectural style were given ample and open space. Additionally, they were the most sought out and venerated buildings, being worth many times more than any glass office tower. The best example of this is the Central Station. It has 2 whole city blocks, which were going to be used for buildings, but were made into parks to have space in front of the building to be able to see it amongst all the surrounding skyscrapers, which is almost parallel to real-life Tokyo's Central Station in Japan, which is also surrounded by skyscrapers, but has a large plaza to separate it from the dense towers and give it a large open space around it for people to be able to see it in all its glory. Also, the building is the second most expensive in the city, being worth more than the behemoth buildings like J&B Mall, corporate offices, and the 2020 Tower Commercial Center, despite being of smaller size and scale by many factors. Other examples include the Mint, which has a waterfront location to show off its exterior, and the Stock Exchange, which was given permission to be the city's tallest building and built in an open area to show off all of its beautiful exterior. Other historical buildings have their own situations that allow them to dominate and stand out from the rest. Not only this, but there was also a trend of demolishing structures to upgrade them to larger structures. and some proposals came out to alter or outright destroy some of these classical buildings, like these smaller Japanese style houses, because developers thought it was an inefficient use of space. However, they were never given permission, and the players protested when they would be proposed to be demolished. These buildings were essentially put on a pedestal and given special attention and treatment over any of the other ones. Let me recap everything before we get to the main point. The city and government and economic systems were set up on the first day. The city grew rapidly, causing policies to use land efficiently, making it common for buildings to be covered up and become forgotten as soon as space in the city was essentially eliminated. Classical buildings were given special treatment and often had land around them open to view, causing these buildings to dominate in a dense cityscape. This experiment of the city of Daitoshi is the key case study to why classical architecture will still dominate the metaverse, even if the primary architectural style is contemporary, as seen in Daitoshi, with its classical structures dominating and standing out in a sea of gray and glass. And this makes sense. They are appealing, beautiful, and the best shows for craftsmanship and creativity. Now what about the rest of the metaverse? In Minecraft, which is already established as a virtual world and platform, there are many servers with thousands of users, such as Hypixel, which solely relies on classical style buildings to host their lobbies and minigames. On survival servers, still with limited resources, players build medieval European style homes and towns. And this would also be the case on other metaverse platforms of the future. There's also a lot of money involved with this. As in Hypixel, they're paying full-time wages to have people build maps and buildings for the future content of the server. As the economy of the metaverse is developed, classical architecture is a viable and attractive option to monetize as more products develop and the demand for virtual maps and cities are expanded. Thank you so much for watching.